Tequila to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Time to talk about those edge rushers. The 49ers had to make some decisions when it came to edge rush. During the season, they were looking for players that were going to be able to play the position at a high level because Drake Jackson, first of all, wasn't playing really the level they wanted him to play, and then he suffered an injury. So the 49ers went out looking for players that they could add to the roster, and they found some guys. They were able to bring in guys to help with this football team and potentially push them over the top. Getting Chase Young is always a nice move when you can get a guy that was a top 3 pick in the NFL draft and a player with explosive abilities, size, speed, everything there for what you're looking for. They also brought in Randy Gregory along the way as well from Denver. They used late round picks to be able to acquire defensive ends to help rush opposite of Nick Bosa. But this has been a question mark about players opposite of Bosa for a while. The 49ers have had some solid players. Of course, Dee Ford was the one they really wanted to make an impact on this football team. With the speed and power combination, he was electric in 2019 opposite of Nick Bosa. But we know back injuries, neck injuries derailed what Dee Ford was going to be able to do. So then they went ahead and they found other guys that were similar. Go and bring Samson Ebukam in, trade for Charles Omenihu, sign Arden Key, and you have guys that can rush opposite of Bosa, but also have some versatility to move inside. But it seems every single time the San Francisco 49ers find an edge defender that complements Nick Bosa, they go and get a huge deal on the open market. Samson Ebukam, close to $10 million a year. Charles Omenihu, close to $10 million a year. Arden Key just got his second contract since being away from the 49ers, over $10 million a year. This is just something that has become the norm when it comes to the 49ers. Development by Chris Kaserik of defensive ends has led to contracts. Now, even though all those players got big money out on the open market, it's not like they produce at the level that the 49ers were expecting. 49ers haven't had a double-digit sack guy opposite of Bosa the whole time. I mean, Dee Ford was the guy that got it done. But everybody else, they've been looking for that guy that could even come close to getting those numbers. You're usually getting those numbers from the interior defensive line, whether that was Eric Armstead in 2019 or others who have been able to get after the quarterback. This year, it was Javon Hargrave with 7.5. So the 49ers have been looking for that answer at the edge. And you can always address it in the draft. You can go get players, and if it meets up and it aligns, you go ahead and you get those guys. A few years ago, it was Drake Jackson in the second round. Let's bring in Drake. Last year, it was let's bring in Robert Beal and see what he can do. We started hearing about GTFO. That was a new term for Chris Kaserik and the stats group there. That was going ahead and tell you how fast somebody gets off the football. And so the 49ers are consistently looking for a edge defender opposite of Bosa that can make an impact. So they addressed it in free agency, and they addressed it in free agency in a big way. So we're going to talk about how this depth chart looks, some of the players the 49ers have added, and some guys who may be at the bottom of the roster you're not really aware of yet. But we're going to give an overview. We'll have to do a deeper dive on them in another episode. But I hope you guys will all check out this episode, the depth chart. Let's get it set up because the 49ers are going to go through OTAs. They're going to work to training camp, and this is how the depth chart could possibly look heading into training camp. And then that's where you start to make your roster. So like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Well, For the 49ers, when it comes to playing edge, it's really easy to see where it starts. It starts with the guy on the thumbnail, Nick Bosa. As soon as Nick Bosa became the second overall pick in the 2019 NFL draft, the 49ers knew that one side of their defensive line was going to be set and established for years to come. The 49ers knew day one how good Nick Bosa was. And Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch's philosophy on football and building a football team starts in the trenches and starts at defensive line. You got to be able to stop the run. Bosa does that pretty well, but you also got to be able to get after the quarterback. The most critical player on the entire field is the quarterback. So you either want to get after him or you want to protect him. And the 49ers chose Bosa to go ahead and get after him. And Bosa has shown the ability to be a all-pro player in this league, a defensive player of the year. So the 49ers know what they got. But like I brought up earlier, the question marks have been, what do they have after? Ebukam, Aminahue, D. Ford, all possible guys who came and left. And the 49ers thought Drake Jackson potentially was the guy last year. Drake's not. So the 49ers have looked in the open market and they brought in a couple of players. First off, they brought in Leonard Floyd. And this was a dynamite signing for the 49ers because Leonard Floyd is the model of consistency. Leonard Floyd consistently gets around double-digit sacks, and most of the time he gets double-digit sacks, and he's always available to play. What are some of the concerns you had with a guy like D. Ford? He wasn't available to play. What are concerns about Drake Jackson? He hasn't always been available to play. You knew Ebukam was going to play for the most part, and you knew Amenahue was going to play for the most part, but neither one of them have produced a 10-sack season in their career. In fact, both of them together on the 49ers barely produced 10 sacks. So the production you're going to get from Floyd right away is going to be huge. He's a legitimate threat off the edge. So if you want to double team Nick Bosa, double team at your own peril. You have to know that Floyd is a very talented technician on the other side. He's got the speed, he's got the strength, he's got the leverage, he's got the arm length, everything you're looking for in an edge defender. Is he as good against the run as maybe some of the other guys who have played opposite of Bosa in the past? No, you're going to give up some in the run game. But where he's very solid is getting after the quarterback. If you get to third and long, that's when you're going to have a real problem with Leonard Floyd. That's when you're going to have opportunities. And I think we all know that the 49ers need somebody that can consistently win opposite of Bosa. When you pay that much attention to Bosa, you need to pay for it. Whether that is Floyd, whether that is Hargrave, whoever that is, they need to make sure that teams pay for paying that much attention to Bosa. If that's the case, it will then open up Bosa to do so much more. Now, we'll see what happens with the defensive philosophy. We know Chris Kasarik is still going to want to run his wide nine, but what will Nick Sorensen do with this defense? Will he move guys around? Will he run stunts? Will he be aggressive? Those things are also going to play into how these guys handle their positions, their roles, and how many opportunities they have to rush from different spots. So it's going to be a wait and see approach. But we've seen D'Amico move him around, so potentially that's what we're going to do. And then we have Brandon Staley, who's involved with Nick Sorensen as far as helping with this defense and game planning. And he has a real knowledge of what Leonard Floyd does from their time when they were together with the Los Angeles Rams. So I think this was a great signing for the 49ers. It added much needed depth, but a legit threat off the outside. Not just a name. Like, Chase Young was having a good season last year, but he had a lot of injury concerns, so there wasn't really the consistency when it came to Chase. With Leonard Floyd, you have consistency, and people are going to absolutely have to game plan for him, and if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. So that was a great signing. I think everyone believes it's Nick Bosa, and then it's Leonard Floyd. And then it's Yetur Gross-Matos. And Yetur Gross-Matos is a solid player, and he's an edge defender that is good against the run. So we talked about where Floyd gives it up a little bit when it comes to the run game. Gross-Matos does not. He's a very solid guy setting the edge and not allowing any sort of push in the run game. That's exactly what you have to have. It's funny the way the 49ers have signed or even traded for players. You're getting the best of both worlds. A guy who's very talented when it comes to pass rushing, and then a guy who sets the edge or is very good against the run. Not only did they do this at defensive end with Gross Matos and Floyd, they did it with defensive tackle as well with Malik Collins and with Jordan Elliott. Malik Collins, the better pass rusher, Jordan Elliott, the better run stopper. The 49ers are getting the best of both worlds and finding a mixture that they can use depending on what they're going against offensively. This is a team that is more prone to run the football right at you with double teams. Well, insert Gross Matos at defensive end, insert Jordan Elliott at defensive tackle, and now you're a better run stopping defense. Now, if you want to get after the quarterback because you got a team that's going to throw a lot, well, now Malik Collins comes in the game and you play more Leonard Floyd. You can definitely play games with it. It also allows you Gross Matos, Jordan Elliott on early downs, Malik Collins, and Leonard Floyd when it's third and long. So the 49ers are doing a good job of building a roster and a depth chart that has ability to do a lot of different things. Your flexibility in your scheme is important. It helps you with matchups. It helps you to be able to overcome, things that you think are obstacles when going against a offense. But I like what the 49ers are doing with the talent they're picking, but Gross Matos was also significant because he still got upside. He still got the ability to continue to grow at the defensive end position. I think he can get better as a pass rusher, but also he's a must fit for the Arden Key role. For those of you who don't know, the Arden Key role was established a little while back. The 49ers decided that they were going to take a defensive end in Arden Key and they were going to move him in on obvious pass downs. Now, it actually had gotten started the year before in 2019. In 2019, the 49ers had Eric Armstead as a base defensive end who played primarily against the run. On obvious pass downs, Armstead would move inside next to Buckner, and in came D Ford, and Bosa would rush on the other side. That's where the 49ers first experienced it. Now, later on, they decided to go ahead and make Arden Key that guy that did that. And Key was very successful, especially on the inside, being too quick for interior offensive linemen with his defense of in talent as far as speed and agility. Now, he was unique because he's able to hold up in the run game as well, because he was physical and he was big and he was long and he played low for a defensive end. So he was able to hold up. Those players are unique. The 49ers have been looking for guys like that. Charles Omenihu was one of those guys. Traded for him from Houston, and he stepped right into that Arden Key role with a lot of success. Now, Gross Matos. Gross Matos is billed in the same way. He can play it just like those guys. Key, a better pass rusher than all of them, but all of them good handwork, good technique, able to set the edge in the run. So they have position versatility to play outside and inside. So the 49ers get their guy that now can go back to running this type of scheme. And you want versatility, you want flexibility within your scheme, and it gives Chris Kasarik another weapon to be able to use on obvious pass downs. You want to pull a defensive tackle? You want to pull Malik Collins? You can do that. You put your Tier Gross Matos inside next to Javon Hargrave, and then you rush Leonard Floyd and you rush Nick Bosa. That's probably your best pass rush group together. So 49ers coming with versatility, and they got it with these two free agent signings that I think everyone was expecting them to sign at least one. But the fact that they went out there and got two, very impressive. They let other guys like Cleveland Farrell, Chase Young, they let them go ahead and move on. Randy Gregory, 3 defensive ends leave. These two guys come in, and they're going to fill a myriad of roles. Next up is Robert Beal. And I don't know if people are going to have Robert Beal as the 4th best defensive end, but that's kind of where I'm going, because when it came down to push came to shove last season, Robert Beal was getting significant snaps, and he didn't play a lot during the playoffs. He didn't play a lot during the Super Bowl, but he was available. He was in those roster spots, and he was going out there and getting some snaps in. Now, Beal has got something that everyone wishes they had, is that first step speed, that elite speed, DTFO, as Chris Kasarik would say. He's also a big physical guy who should be able to set the edge against the run. He was definitely a guy that was developmental, but he got a season. He got practice time in. He's got the ability now to step in and make something happen. So hopefully he can stay healthy through training camp this year and really go out there and show the 49ers what he's got. I think they're high on Robert Beal with the versatility that he can run He could cover guys if you need him to. He can come off the edge. He can set the edge in the run. You'll probably slide him inside sometimes on obvious pass downs. So I think they like Robert Beal and what he could add to this football team. And that's what you have to have when you're getting into your depth. You have to have guys you can count on that bring something unique. And whenever you have that kind of speed and that ability to get off, you got to feel like they have something different than everybody else. So Beal Jr. is somebody that we can see some development coming from this season, and maybe he will step into his own and create that fourth edge rusher, because you can't have Nick Bosa taking all the snaps. It just doesn't work out that way. Bosa's going to eventually wear down. Everyone does. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Now, Bosa, he'll do it as long as he can, but getting a steady rotation makes it so Nick Bosa, so Leonard Floyd are available at the end of the game to go close things out. That's what you want, fresh defensive players when you get to the end of the game that can go close this game out. And 49ers, if they get a step in the right direction from Robert Beal, could be 4 deep at defensive end, something they haven't really been. They were trying to get there last year, but it wasn't really working out. So Beal could be very significant to the 49ers this season. Now, number 5, Drake Jackson. And Drake Jackson coming in behind Robert Beal has a lot to do with the fact he's not that good of a run stopper. We knew that this was going to be a question mark, but we were hoping he was going to develop as a guy that could set the edge against the run. The problem is it hasn't got there. In fact, last season, it felt like it took even a further step back. He was getting put on the ground. He was getting kicked out. They were creating lanes and making it more difficult for the linebackers to have to make tackles in space. And when that happens and you're not in your spot and you get pushed, it creates bigger holes. Bigger holes mean tougher time to be able to tackle in that hole. So when it comes to Drake Jackson, he's got to get a whole lot better when it comes to stopping the run. And if he's going to be just a premier pass rusher, he's got to get to the quarterback consistently. Now, last year in Pittsburgh, he had 3 sacks in that game, but they were all run and chase sacks. And that's important to have a guy that can run and chase the quarterback when you have Nick Bosa on the other side. But eventually, they're going to put all their attention on Bosa, not allow him to have any victories, and then you have to win. You can't just run and chase. And I think that's the problem with Drake Jackson. We didn't see the development in his pass rush technique from year 1 to year 2. He was well documented that he worked out and tried to get stronger during the offseason last year. I think there's still a lot that he's got to do to get better as far as speed and power and being able to translate that speed and power into pass rush. He's got all the athletic ability in the world. That's why people are so high on him. But he's got to be able to bend the corner. He's got to be able to get home. And he's got to be able to get home on the first move on occasion. And then the second move he's got to put together. I don't think we've saw secondary pass rush moves that have worked for Drake Jackson. He looks overpowered. He looks outmatched. He looks like when an offensive lineman get their hands on him, it's pretty much a done deal. But we've got to get better technique. We've got to get better leverage. We got to get better speed. There's a lot of things that need to go the right way for Drake Jackson. I think Chris Kasarik definitely going to keep working on it. I don't think they've given up on Jackson, that's for sure. But the truth is, there's no guarantees Drake Jackson makes this roster for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, if they keep 5 defensive ends, he might squeak in at number 5. But right now, if they keep 4, he's going to have to overtake Robert Beal Jr. And will the 49ers look at Robert Beal Jr. and the way that he played last year and say, you know what, we think because he can set the edge, he's somebody we would rather have with that pass rush upside. He's still got that quick step. So Drake Jackson, Robert Beal are going to be an absolute battle when it comes to this defensive end position. Next up, a familiar name, Austin Bryant. He came over last year from the Detroit Lions, and he got a few times where he came up to the main roster. He was on the practice squad, and then he was elevated. And the 49ers even did the same thing, elevated him for the playoffs and Super Bowl. They didn't actually make him active for the game, but he was a elevation. And Bryant's a unique athlete from Clemson. He's been in the league for a little while, and he had one season with Detroit where he had 5 sacks, and he shows explosiveness. He shows the ability to get home to the quarterback on occasion. And what's interesting about him, you see him on the practice field when I went to training camp, it looks like he plays power forward in the NBA. He's got long legs, a long build, very strong. The guy's got the look of what it takes to be a defensive end in the NFL. And so it was his first time consistently putting his hand in the ground, and he thought he did a pretty good job. He developed enough during training camp for the 49ers to keep him around in the practice squad and for them to elevate him on occasion. His real problem is being able to disengage from offensive players. You know who else has that problem? Drake Jackson. And so you've got to be able to consistently get better. So he has the athleticism, the first step to be able to get home, but the consistency with pass rush techniques has been a problem. Also, even though he set the edge okay, he needs to get better setting the edge against the run. So I think Austin Bryant's still developmental. He's still younger. He's not old, so he's still got room for improvement. And I think he's battling. He's one of these guys that's battling for a roster spot. But right now I have him behind Robert Beal and Drake Jackson because the 49ers invested draft capital in them. Austin Bryant's very talented, and he could definitely go in there and steal it. When he's talking about athleticism, Beal, Jackson, Austin Bryant, super athletic. I think he cruises in there right there at that 6th spot. Next up, Alex Barrett. And Alex Barrett's been around the 49ers team for a few years now on the practice squad. Occasionally he gets brought up. The guy that's continued to work on his body, continued to work on his craft. And every single year when you go to training camp, he gets everyone's attention because there's a motor. He's going to win certain reps. He uses leverage. He plays low. He maximizes his ability. And you got to give a lot of credit to Alex Barrett for how he competes. He's also willing to play inside and out. That's something that Chris Kacerek uses him a lot. They have a defensive tackle injury. He'll step in and get defensive tackle reps, especially at camp and in practice. But he rushes from the edge, and he's normally an edge defender. And he does a pretty good job setting the edge. He uses all of his frame to be able to keep himself from getting pushed out and creating these big open holes for running backs to run the football. His problem is he doesn't have the quick twitch of the guys ahead of him. He doesn't have the ability to consistently bend the corner. He doesn't have the length to be able to win with the straight arm. He doesn't have, the necessary speed to size ratio to consistently win in bull rushes. So he has to use technique and he has to use skill to get everything he gets. And I think he does a good job. I think he's a good player. I just don't think that he's got a shot to make this 49ers 53-man roster. I think he's more than likely potentially ends up on the practice squad again. But if one of these other younger players, potentially, fall through the cracks, don't make the 53, they might be on the practice squad instead of him. So he's a guy they feel comfortable with. He knows the system. He knows what his responsibilities are. They know if they had to bring him up, he will give everything he's got, and he will battle and compete. And a lot of times that's what you're looking for when you're talking about depth pieces, especially on the practice squad, because those guys are also going to push your starters in practice and give them a good look. So Barrett is a fun guy. He's been around the team for a long time. I think the 49ers will keep him around as long as they can, but I don't think he's a legitimate option to make this team. You'll probably hear in training camp some people saying, hey, Alex Barrett's actually one of the top 5 guys. It happens every single year, and then he doesn't make the roster. And a lot of it is because, he's a guy that works. He works hard, but he just doesn't have it overall necessary size and speed and everything. Raymond Johnson is on the 49ers now, and 6'3", 270 pounds. He was a undrafted free agent who signed with the New York Football Giants out of college. He went to Georgia State, and he's a guy that's kind of a tweener because at 6'3", 270, he's a big defensive end, but he doesn't really have the speed at 4'9" to be a guy that can consistently bend the corner. You don't see that on his film. You don't see a guy that consistently wins from the outside, but a guy that has to get more into the body, has to rely more on his physicality, his heavy hands to get into the chest plate of the offensive lineman and get a little bit of a bull rush going. He can throw in some moves, so he has some technique work, and I'm sure it's gotten a little bit better since his college days in his time in the NFL. So the 49ers bringing in guys that are bigger, that are better at setting the edge in the run, doesn't surprise me at all when you got guys like Drake Jackson and Robert Beal and Austin Bryant already, right? You get those guys who are a little bit different. But I think that's what they got going on here with Raymond Johnson. I think he's an interesting prospect. I'm curious to see what he looks like in Kacerek's system. How quickly is he going to get off the ball? I think if he can't put pressure off the edge, the 49ers might look to move him inside on occasion and see if he can pass rush from the inside. But this is one of those guys you're bringing in. See what you can get out of him. He may be the new Alex Barrett, as a guy with a little bit more upside than Barrett because he's got a little bit more length, a little bit more size. Could be a little bit interesting for him. And then the next is Sam Okawanu. He was a defensive lineman / edge out of Maryland, so a former Terrapin. And the 49ers brought him in, and he had been on the Tennessee Titans, an undrafted free agent from the Tennessee Titans. When you're looking at him, when you're seeing size, he's 6'1", 290. You're talking about a big defensive end. Now, not tall. That height is only the top 10 percentile when it comes to height. But 290 at that position at 6'1", you're talking about a guy well put together, a lot of muscle, a lot of size, not very long arms, but he runs a 4.7 40. The guy can move. He's very fast. He's got a pretty good shuttle, a 35-inch vertical. He was strong. He did 31 bench press reps. 3 cone was 7.48. So this is a guy that moves for a defensive end. I think he's a more transitional guy that can play outside and inside. I think he's built in that manner. He can give you defensive ends reps as a base defensive end, and then on obvious pass downs, he can move inside. In college, that's how he won. When he got moved inside, he won on the inside. So it's a guy that fits a certain niche within the 49ers defense. They're looking for guys with versatility that can win on the inside. We talked about Gross Matos earlier, and there are other guys as well that are edge defenders that are going to play inside. So 49ers definitely have their type. As you're going through the roster, you see their depth chart. They have a certain type of player. And now they have these guys who are undrafted free agents towards the bottom of the roster that you can go ahead and bring in. And Chris Kacerek has talked about before that, he works with these guys as far as he looks at them in the draft. He works through everything, and then he kind of keeps an eye on them, see what they're doing, see where they go, see how much success they're having. Because just because they don't work out in another system doesn't mean they won't fit your system. You feel like you get someone in your system, you maximize their abilities, and maybe they pan out. So 49ers going with some guys that have some ability, they have some size, they can bring in and potentially develop, which is a little bit different than last year where there was a lot more names that you were very, very familiar with. But they got some guys now that are on this team. So the way I got the edge depth chart right now, heading into OTAs, heading into mini camps, and then, of course, training camp, is Nick Bosa, of course, 1, Leonard Floyd, 2, Yetur Gross-Matos, 3, Robert Beal, 4, Greg Jackson, 5, Austin Bryant, 6, Alex Barrett, 7, Raymond Johnson, 8, and then Sam Okawanu, 9. And the truth is, I think this is how the 49ers are going to have it, but I actually like Okawanu a little bit better than Raymond Johnson. So you could flip those guys or whatever, but 49ers got some talent at the edge rush. Of course, we know 4 or 5 guys are going to make this team from the edge rush room, and that will determine what happens at defensive line when it comes to defensive tackles. And, of course, I'm going to get to that depth chart as well because the 49ers brought in some new additions and lost someone, so that's going to be a lot of fun as well. Let me know what you guys think about the 49ers defensive end or edge rush room. Did they do enough to address the concerns that they've had over the last couple of seasons, and especially last season, where they just didn't get the production out of the young players, and they had to go out and they had to get Chase Young and Randy Gregory and bring guys in? I want to know what you think about that. Do you think I have these guys slotted correctly? Would you put Drake Jackson above Robert Beal? I want to know about that as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. 49ers Cutback on Believe. Available on all audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. And, of course, this episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.